This City Council workshop is now in session. For the record, all of the members of the council have their face masks with them, but we are social distancing and so do not use them during the meeting. In regard to public comments, we did not receive any prior to this meeting. So at this time, I'm going to ask Mrs. McElhannon. There is no public comment, right?
No, sir, there's no public comment.
All right, okay. Then let's move to the fiscal year 2021 major budget items.
Yes, sir. I'll go ahead and introduce this while Amy makes her way up to the podium. I think that the word austere has caught on with a lot of people, as far as what this budget represents. You'll see a budget when you get the official proposed budget that is less than last year. So that's the kind of budget that we're looking at. And you're not going to see a lot of significant change even today from what you saw at your retreat. There's going to be some updated information and some small changes, but not anything really major. And then the next step for us after today is to get that certified roll on Friday. So that date's already here, and hopefully it'll be substantially complete without a lot of protests still being processed. And we'll be able to try to run some numbers pretty quick on that, but we may not actually have something for you until the following week once we can nail some things down. But we'll get that information to you as soon as we can process it. So today is about all the other funds with the exception of general fund. And so we got a lot of slides to cover, but there's, again, not a lot of new information. So Amy, will you go ahead and proceed?
Yes. Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning.
As you can see from the list on this first slide, these are the funds that we're going to talk about today. And there are a lot of other small funds, but we're going to hit the highlights on some of the ones that have significant activity. And like Mark said, these are things that will look fairly familiar to you because we have discussed them already this summer. So just to go back to the calendar and the process, so we're moving on down the line to the Water Fund and Other Funds Workshop. We are looking at Friday as the day to get the certified roll. I checked in yesterday to see if I could get any updates, but I haven't heard back. So I know they're busy. They're working working to get everything done by Friday. And the last we heard, they were making pretty good progress getting through their protests. But I know that, we're expecting to still see significant numbers in protest in comparison to what we usually see, because usually they get through just about all of them by the time we get a certified roll. So we'll get that Friday. Then next Friday, July 31st, is when the proposed budget will be filed. So that gets filed with the city secretary, and we put it at the library. And I'll send y'all electronic copies. Anyone who wants a hard copy of it, let me know. But it'll be, a full book like this. So there's a lot to digest in it. So you may like a hard copy. And then from there, we'll get rolling in August and give the official presentation of the budget at a council meeting and get into setting the tax rate and actually going through the process of voting on both the budget and the tax rate. All right, moving on to today's topic, we're going to start with the Water Fund. So the Water Fund is the second largest fund, and we are not proposing any changes to the utility rates for fiscal year 2021. You may remember that we did have some changes in fiscal year 20. Last year, we went through a rate study with the outside rate consultants, and we made some changes in the rates and how they're structured. This is our first year of those rates, and we're not planning any changes for 21. Within the water fund, the largest operating expense category is personnel, and then it's followed by services, which is primarily utilities. It's interesting that it like requires a lot of electricity to make water, so we spend a lot on that.
Chemicals.
Yeah, and the chemicals are in the supplies category. It requires a lot of that as well, and maintenance is another big expense. Water production is our largest department in the water fund. Right now, we're currently not balanced, but we will be by July 31st, but we're close. So we're $48,000 off right now. So we'll either need to adjust revenues some or adjust expenditures some, but we're getting close. Let's see, moving on to water fund revenues. So you can see the split there between water revenue and sewer revenue. And that water revenue includes the reuse water as well as the regular water revenue. And then we also have a chunk called other there, and the other revenue includes things like septic haulers, which is a surprisingly large number, almost $400,000 in revenue for septic haulers. We also have things like late fees, new account fees, new meters, sewer taps, that kind of thing in the other category. So our total revenue budget is $13 million, and that's flat with where we are currently. Our current year's budget is $5,000 different on revenues than this budget. We've adjusted components individually, but in total, it's coming out about the same. Next week in our council meeting, we'll be talking about just the monthly update, and you'll see that right now we're behind budget on water revenue and a little bit ahead of budget on sewer revenue. And so, it's water revenue is always difficult because it's based on a normal rainfall year. And then even within the normal rainfall year, we try to break out what a normal month is within the normal year. So, that doesn't exactly happen. But it is our first year with this new model, and we feel like that the water model is a little bit high and the sewer model is a little bit low. So we're making some adjustments between water and sewer in our model, and that'll show up in this budget as well, where the water revenues, we're taking that down a little bit, sewer revenue, we're taking that up a little bit, and that's based on our actual experience this year. Moving on to water fund expenditures. Right now, we're at $13.1 million, and that's up $43,000 compared to our original budget this year. We will be tweaking that a little bit in the next 2 weeks. Part of this includes the street use fee. So the street use fee is a transfer from the water fund to the general fund, specifically for street maintenance. And it's 4% of water fund revenues. And it was increased to 4% in 2020, and it'll remain at 4% in 21 as well. Consistent with all of our other funds that have employees, there's no change in base pay. We are seeing some increases in personnel expenses because of benefits. We've talked about health insurance benefits are going up a little bit, and our retirement funding is going up a little bit based on an actuarial study. So you'll see those increases, but the actual base pay is remaining the same. Debt service. So a big part of water fund expenditures is we have debt that is paid for by water fund revenue, and this is debt that goes to pay for our water system. Those improvements are very expensive. And so we transfer over to our debt service fund just the amount that's needed for the debt service in that year. So our debt service for 2021 is actually a little bit lower than the debt service in fiscal year 20. So that debt service transfer is decreasing by $148,000. And you'll hear about on your next council meeting the potential that we have to do another refunding. So refunding is like a refinancing for municipal debt. And we have two issuances, two series, a 2012 and a 2013, that are now eligible to be refunded. And we are in a very low interest rate environment right now. So it looks like it's gonna, the numbers are gonna work for us to move forward with the refunding and realize some savings from that refunding. But for what we're presenting in this budget, we're gonna present the debt service schedules as is, because that refunding has not happened and we don't know exactly what it will look like. So we're giving you the existing debt service schedules.
I mean, when you say that we're gonna tweak the number, is that gonna come on the expense side or the revenue side?
We're working on that.
A little bit of
It
both,
could,
maybe?
it could come on either, and there could be some adjustments in both revenue and expense. But basically, we have to, get it to a completely balanced budget. So, but that is a good point that both the general fund and the water fund, we will be presenting balanced budgets to you. The other funds that we talk about, especially our like special revenue funds, those do not have to have balanced budgets. Capital projects funds do not have to be balanced. For example, the Library Memorial Fund received a large gift last year. They don't have to spend that gift in the year they receive it. They can build up a fund balance and we can present an unbalanced budget in a future year, but water fund and general fund will be balanced when we present them to you. Let's see. Then we have seen, when you see the individual departments in your proposed budget book, you'll see some increases in those benefit costs like we talked about, and the supplies costs specifically related to chemical supplies and maintenance costs. Let's see. Before I move on to hotel occupancy fund, are there any other water fund issues or questions that anyone has? Not a lot of change. It's going to be very flat to what the current year is, and no change to the rates or the structure of the rates. All right. Moving on to hotel occupancy tax. So this is one that is very hard to predict given the current situation. So I wanted to show you where we are right now, and kind of, what we're looking at going into it. So hotel occupancy tax is occupancy tax that we get from hotel stays in our area, and we have to use these funds for specifically allowed items. And it's basically, we have to promote tourism in our town with these funds. So we cannot use hotel occupancy funds to fund police or parks or something like that. We have to use it for specific tourism related activities. So you can see that we have had significant impacts related to COVID with hotel occupancy tax. Sales tax, we always talk about that being on a 2-month lag. Hotel occupancy tax is a 1-month lag. So in May, we got revenue representing April stays, and that was our hardest hit month. And we were down 83% compared to the same period the prior year. In June, for May stays, our hotel occupancy tax was 47% less than the prior year. We're just starting to get our July revenues in right now. We don't get them until after the 15th of the month. So I'll have more of an update for you at your meeting. But hotel occupancy tax is coming back. Our hotels are back open, and the ones that were completely closed have reopened. But we still are expecting this to take a while to get back to the pre-pandemic levels. So what we're looking at right now is a 21 budget that is 10% less than the 2019 actual. As far as how that breaks out between quarters, we're thinking quarter 1 is going to be impacted more significantly, and then there'll be recovery in quarter 2 through 4 of next year. We are in a good position because, according to the experts, it looks like regional drive-to destinations and outside activity destinations will be the first to recover, and Kerrville really, checks all the boxes there.
Let me just say something about that.
Yes.
We have more RV spots than we do hotel rooms. And RVing is just booming right now. And so that, we're going to see a benefit of that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And just to clarify, so RVers don't pay hotel occupancy tax. But they still come to our city and
I'm
you know,
sorry,
pay
I
sales
thought
tax
they
and that
did,
kind of
but
thing.
anyway.
I wish
Yeah.
they did.
Okay, so part of this, I'm looking at this slide, part of this is, a big part of the hot fund goes to CVB. So CVB is aware of the proposed budget and is submitting a budget within that range.
Yes, EA and I met with Charlie McIlvain and Julie Land from the CBB a couple of weeks ago. And we've been meeting with them on about a quarterly basis since the pandemic started. You're right, the biggest chunk of our hotel occupancy tax funds go to the CBB. And they've worked with us this year to reduce the expenses that they could in the last half of the year, basically. You know, a lot of their expenses are related to advertising. And so they scaled back wherever they could there. We have met with them regarding this year's budget. In past years, you may remember that they've held kind of a luncheon and they give a whole presentation and talk about their budget. They didn't, you know, feel that that was appropriate given the circumstances this year. But they certainly are willing to present at any council meeting or via Zoom, that kind of thing. If you have specific questions about their budget, but yes, they are completely on board with a 10% decrease for their budget. The other thing to note there that we specifically talked to them about is because we really just don't know what is going to happen with occupancy tax, and it really depends on if there are, you know, the spike that's going on right now, if there's additional closures, how comfortable people are feeling, that kind of thing. We plan to meet with them on a quarterly basis and reassess so that if we're not anywhere close to, you know, this 10% decrease, if we're significantly down from there, they will continue to adjust their funding down. I know they're specifically looking at things like advertising contracts, making sure they can get out of them or that they don't have to enter into them until later in the year, you know, making some changes like that. EA, is there anything else you want to say about that meeting?
No, it's a good summary of it. I think they're trying to, you know, obviously stay very fluid and dynamic given the situation, and I think a lot of their, you know, the partners that they're working with are also being very fluid with the contractual relationships. So they don't want to miss the timing for when things start to swing back, and we talked about the RV market already. But they're just trying to be very adaptable and continue to, where appropriate, continue to bring traffic to this tourism destination.
I hate to ask this, but is their office open? I have.
It is
wasn't.
open.
It is okay, and
It
it's just Charlie and a one person maybe.
It's a little bit limited in scope. They have had some folks working from home and continue. A lot of what they've been doing during the pandemic is the reschedule work of rescheduling conferences and kind of making sure that traffic does return here when it's safe to do so.
Right.
Yes, but I asked that same question, and I was actually surprised to hear how much traffic they are still receiving
Really?
in their office. So it is still open.
Okay.
It was closed for, I believe, April and end of May, some
Right.
maybe, but they are back open.
Okay, good.
So on the things that we're not doing or we're doing less than,
Mhm.
all of, I mean, when it comes to general fund and what is, I think of that as kind of internal, but when you're talking about hot funds and that it funds other sources, all of the sources that we're planning to fund or not fund this year, are they, by the time we file the proposed budget, are they all kind of aware of whatever changes there are? And then not on hot fund, but just an extension of that KEDC with their budget. That'll be filed. I just remember, I'm sorry, because last year was my first year, I just remember that obviously we saw the CVV budget before we passed our budget and then the KEDC budget also. So how do those play together when we're looking at the overall budget?
So you'll get the KEDC budget, I think next month. And it's gonna be less. I can tell you that. The EIC saw that budget last night, and then they'll adopt it hopefully at their next meetings or their August meeting, and then it'll come straight to you before you have to take action on the overall budget. And CVB, since we're not doing the big meeting, this is basically the number. And what we'll do is we'll include the detail of that budget request, the 891,000. We'll provide that to you all.
And that'll be in the proposed budget book, just kind of a bullet point list, and that's similar to how it was last year as well. And yeah, KEDC is proposing a 21% decrease to their budget, and that is what we have factored into the general fund right now. But yeah, you can see back to hotel occupancy fund, the primary expenses for this fund are the CVB and then some event funding, and we have a list here. It is a little bit of a decrease from the current budget. The current budget also had some contingency in it. We don't have any contingency built into the 21 budget, so part of that decrease is no contingency. Playhouse 2000, we're leaving at the same amount, funding at the same amount as 2020.
Why is that when everybody else is having to decrease?
Is that anything you want to?
Yeah, so the hope is that as we're going into the fall time frame and throughout that next year, that those were beginning to ramp back up then with performances and other elements. But again, that's one that we deal with every year from a contractual obligation standpoint. We're just going to have to see what the situation is with closures and how much they are actually intending to be open. But right now, that the intent is to be able to fully support them in the way that we have before.
And what's the majority of theirs spent on? It's not ever, is it maintenance and upkeep and that kind of thing?
Yeah, yes. And yeah, they do have some, limited personnel, but they do pay for utilities, maintenance, that kind of thing, on the building itself.
Some of those elements are just basic requirements of continuing to operate that facility that the city owns versus actually putting on performances. And those are there whether the performances are occurring or not.
Are you aware they will have an air conditioning, probably replacement issue to deal with pretty soon? I think it's a 20-year-old, or it's a very old unit, the one that ACs the VK garage. So they're running right now with half a unit. And right now with the limited amount of, I'm just letting you know, I'm sure Jeffrey's already told you this, but it's just something they've been putting the Band-Aid on for a couple of years now. I think it's going to eventually, it's unfortunate the timing is not very good, but you can't have no air conditioning in a theater.
I'm certainly going to leave it up to staff to figure it out. To me, it seems like if everybody else is having to tighten the belt, it wouldn't hurt for them to tighten the belt a little bit either. So.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we have too is the P2K contract is a multi-year contract, and the rest of them are all one-year funding agreements. It is probably subject to appropriation, but so.
Again, I'm leaving it to staff.
And theirs also is subject to, they have to raise matching funds for a portion of this too. All right, but yeah, like we've talked about, this one is going to be a more fluid one throughout the year. If we see significant changes one way or the other in our revenues, we'll be evaluating, especially with CVB, what kind of changes that may be.
Amy, with the projections that you're looking at for revenue, both this year and next year, remind me of how much we think we're going to have to hit fund balance to make up lost revenue.
So our fiscal year 20 estimated budget, we're looking like we're going to dip into fund balance about 155,000. So be in the red, ending the year 2020 about 155,000. We are proposing a balanced budget for fiscal year 21.
What does that leave? What does that leave us on our percent?
So there is fund balance available, I think is.
Oh, in the hot fund.
In the hot fund, yeah,
Okay.
so it's just drawing down
Yeah.
that fund balance a little bit. But they do have adequate fund balance available. But we certainly don't want to, continue drawing it down, and we are proposing a balanced budget for next year. All right. Moving on to golf. So let's see. So their new golf cart lease has now been completed, and you may have seen they've actually received those carts. We've also talked about with y'all already some small rate increases, $1 to $2 for green fees and cart fees. I believe you should have received the proposed fee schedule as well with those outlined there. The course maintenance staff has been restructured. They've reduced some part-time hours and reduced a position. So they have seen some savings there. You'll see this graph across over on the left-hand side here, though. They are still looking at, losing about $114,000 this year, looking at revenues being less than expenses by about $113,000. We're looking at the transfer in from the general fund to the golf fund staying the same at $80,000. And they are proposing with that transfer that their budget will be balanced.
I had gone over to look at the new golf carts. They look great. And one of the things that Scott had done was a 2-year or a 2-month, he was able to negotiate a 2-month non-payment on the golf carts, and which I thought was a good thing. And but they really, really do look nice, and will save in many ways with that maintenance with those new batteries.
Yeah, I went by there this weekend, and they're really busy. So I'll bet that they actually beat this revenue number for the current year.
Well, and the greens look great. I mean, they're doing a good job. So,
Do you still have to reserve in advance? There's the pro shop, is it open?
you have to reserve in advance. I think they're open a little bit, but they want reservations.
Right,
Yes.
okay.
The pro shop is open, we're still trying to limit folks that are in the lobby, just so we don't have a big crowd in there. It's kind of one in, one out, but you just can't go in.
Okay,
But we do recommend reservations in advance.
it's good to have a tea time before you walk in.
That's right.
All right, moving on to debt service. So we have two different debt service funds. There's one on the general fund side and there's one on the water side. We're going to talk about the general fund side first. I have two different ways of showing this to you. This graph here shows by every single issuance that we have. And the second graph, which I think may be a little easier to read, is looking at it in terms of what is supported by property tax and what is supported by EIC. So you'll see that dark blue up at the top. Those are issuances for the sports complex and River Trail that EIC supports through sales tax revenue. So they don't impact property tax at all. They're sales tax supported. You can see that we're not planning on issuing any new debt. And from a property tax perspective, the debt portion of our property tax rate is expected to remain the same at 7.35 cents per $100 of assessed value. You can see that we will have debt dropping off when we get to after 2022. And the refunding that I talked about could impact one of the EIC issuances. So it won't impact any of the property tax supported debt, but one of the EIC issuances related to River Trail is eligible for that refunding. And this is a little bit of information provided from our financial advisor. Debt's a complicated subject, but basically, the debt that we have is funded three ways. There's a portion that's funded with property tax, a portion that's funded with sales tax through EIC, and a portion that's funded through water fund revenues. I think some people hear city debt and assume it's all property tax funded. And so this is a comparison chart that's just looking at the property tax funded portion. This is a comparison to other cities in Texas. There's cities that are similar size and that have the same debt rating that we have. And so you can see that, in this kind of lineup, Kerrville's property tax supported debt is towards the bottom compared to these other cities. Moving on to the water fund side. So our water fund debt is higher, and water systems are very expensive. It's also important when you're looking at comparisons to other cities to remember that there's a lot of cities our size that don't own their own water system. There's a lot of cities that just buy water from from a regional district kind of thing. But we actually own our water fund system. We also have a complex water system because of the topography that we have in Kerrville. As you've seen and as you approve contracts for things like lift stations, you know that this infrastructure is expensive. So this is our water fund debt service schedule going all the way out to 2050. You'll see that there's no new debt proposed for next year. There is a city council policy that water fund debt should not exceed 35% of water fund revenues. So in our 21 budget, we'll be at 31% of water fund revenue. That's what the debt service equals. And then as we've talked about before, these 2012 and 2013 issuances are the ones that have the potential to be refunded and come down a little bit on those annual payments. And as we've talked about a little bit before, the 2018A funding, that's our Legion Lift funding from the Texas Water Development Board. It looks like we are going to have remaining funding there after the Legion Lift Station is completed. And so we're working with the Texas Water Development Board currently to shift that funding to the Knapp Road water projects that are similar in nature.
Amy, help me understand, with no new debt service, I mean, I know that's this year, but we're looking at an increase in 22, 23, and 24. And why is that?
So you'll see the green bars there. That is our loan that we have from K-Pub. And this was a loan specifically related to the water reclamation pond. And the way that loan is structured, it was interest only for a period of years, and then the principal payments kick in. So you can see that the green bar, gets much larger starting in 2023. And then that principal is paid off pretty quickly over that period of years.
So one of the things that we'll look at when we do the refunding, that you see in the red and the yellow, we may try to levelize the total by having different payments for different years so that we can, you'll not see those, this curve up
Average it
and
out a
back
little bit.
down.
So just I'm not a math guy, so we're at 31.3% now. On those 22, 23, 24, if it stays this way, are we still going to be under the 35%?
We are planning to be under the 35%. We are looking at, we will have to look at water rates every year and look at, what we're projecting as far as how much growth we've seen in the system and what our revenues, what additional revenues may be from growth. And then also looking at, should we have rate increases in some years. And certainly our consultants last year recommended that, just as costs increase for maintenance or chemicals or that kind of thing, that we shouldn't wait too long to, have catch-up adjustments as far as rate increases. But nothing for 21. That's something that we'll talk about in future years. But yeah, through a combination of refundings, growth in our water system, looking at our rates, we certainly plan to be under the 35%. All right, moving on to general asset replacement. So you may remember this, but just a little bit of tutorial on this. So we have we have the general fund, we have the water fund. Both of those funds have a lot of equipment and asset needs, especially on the vehicle side, that kind of thing. We have separate funds set up specifically for asset replacement, and you can kind of think of them like savings accounts where we move money, hopefully on an annual basis, to save up for purchases that we know we're going to have in the future. And then we buy these vehicles and equipment from the asset replacement fund rather than from the operating fund. So we have a general asset replacement and a water asset replacement. This is looking at the general asset replacement side. And what we have budgeted for next year are 2 dump trucks for our streets department, 3 patrol vehicles for our police department, an ambulance remount.
What is a remount?
So they take the box off and put it on a new cab and chassis rather than, so apparently tell me if I'm getting this right, but the box lasts longer than the cab and chassis. So the cab and chassis part, they get about 7 years out of those before the mileage requirements and maintenance requirements become such that it's better to replace it. But the box can go about 14 years. So we take the box off, put it on a new cab and chassis, and it's cheaper than replacing the entire ambulance each time.
And again, I know I'm nitpicking. $150,000 for a cab and a chassis?
That's what I was thinking.
Well, that includes all the additional equipment on it as well.
And the remounting charge,
Yeah, the light,
but yeah.
lights and grill guards and.
Yeah, to buy a new ambulance is approximately $240,000 for reference. Yeah, this is expensive equipment for sure, especially on the fire side. All the equipment
Not
is
arguing,
very
it
expensive.
just seems like a lot of money for a cab and a chassis.
Let's see. Okay, let's see, virtual host, this is a IT technology expense here. So some of our IT expenses are in this asset replacement fund as well, and there's a lot of things that you might not necessarily think of as asset replacement that are IT related that are very expensive that we try to save up for. So you'll see some of those things hitting here. This Quantar repeater relates to the 911 system and a tower for that. There's one of those coming through this year, another one next year. I think there's like 5, something like that, and they'll be replaced over a period of years. And then vehicle leases. You may remember last year that we entered into a lease program with Enterprise, and we have 5, well, we budgeted for 5 leases this year. We've received 4 of the vehicles. There's one vehicle that we still haven't received because of pandemic-related factory shutdowns, so hopefully that'll be coming in soon. But anyway, what I hear from the departments and from our garage is that everyone's very happy with the vehicle leases here. So these 3 vehicle leases are actually 3 existing ones that we started this year, and then we'll be paying next year as well.
On the police cars.
Yes.
What is it? What's the determination that one is ready to be taken out of the fleet?
It's primarily mileage
Mileage.
based, yeah. And those are very high mileage vehicles. And I believe it's around 100,000 miles, but they usually last 3 to 4 years before they're replaced.
There's also a lot of tracking on the maintenance for all vehicles, and then the garage rates the condition of it and which ones should be replaced or not. We can't always afford everything that needs to be replaced, but the ones that are needed to be replaced the most is where we'll start.
And the police vehicles being contemplated here are all Ford Explorers.
I know some of the ones we replaced last year were like pre-airbag. I mean, so
Yes,
there's almost a
yes.
safety issue involved in some of that.
Yeah,
also.
definitely. When we were doing that analysis with Enterprise, we had some no airbags, some no anti-lock brakes, Yeah, some very old,
So, I mean, I just wrestling in my head, that looks like about 600,000, give or take. What's that, how does that compare to previous years?
in the last couple of years, we've been higher than that, but that's because we've, we bought an aerial ladder truck and we bought 2 pumper trucks, this, really expensive fire department equipment. So, let's see, this year, we're looking at over $1 million. And so it's coming down from that, but specifically when you take out that special fire department equipment, then it's more on par.
More
Those,
online.
yeah, the patrol vehicles, 3 to 4 a year is what their long range plan has. So just depending on the year, either 3 or 4 being replaced. And then that ambulance program is also an every year program, and depending on the year, some years it's the remount and some years it's the completely new ambulance. So we actually just got in a new ambulance.
We're actually picking it up this week.
Yeah, it's the picking up an ambulance this week. So, and that's one of the ones that's the completely new ambulance. So I think it's about 230,000.
And 228 just for the ambulance, that's before equipment.
And I assume whatever salvage values in those vehicles goes back into this fund?
Yeah, we do have a couple of different things that we can do. On some of the specialty fire equipment, we can actually get a trade-in with the manufacturer and have it applied towards the new purchase. So we do that on a few things. But otherwise, we sell the equipment, and there's specific rules that we have to follow when we're selling equipment, and we have to go through an auction basically. So we do an online auction through a site called GovDeals and sell our equipment to the highest bidder. And we do have revenue budgeted each year in this fund for the
But
proceeds.
it comes back into this fund is what I'm
Yes,
saying?
it does.
Okay.
Yeah, and we also sometimes we had a transfer into this fund this year from our insurance fund for a police vehicle that was totaled. So if we get insurance proceeds, but they don't completely cover the cost of a new vehicle, we'll transfer the insurance proceeds into this fund to
Okay.
help us buy
I just
that.
think, again, having been in some situations where if this is a category we ignore, we sure pay the price for it down the road. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep that asset up, because you can't catch up, or it's very, very difficult to catch up once you get behind in it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and certainly that's a primary place that we are looking at if we, sales tax has come in better than expected these last 2 months, and we would really like to be able to move some money over with that additional sales tax to
I
help
agree.
in these future years.
On the dump trucks, how many do we have altogether? Do you know?
I believe we have 8 in the streets department right now. And these are the 2 oldest ones, a 95 and a 98. They're different sizes, and my understanding is that, when they're paving, all 8 of them are in use, and they have to just, continually be going back and picking up more asphalt and that kind of thing. Anything else on that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Amy, I'm a little, don't understand yet. The 3 vehicle leases that you've listed here,
Yes.
is that under enterprise or not?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and they're the existing leases, so we have those leases this year as well. So it's like $5,000 per year per lease, and this is a year's worth of lease payments.
But the guys at the garage are not big fans of the lease vehicles?
They like the lease vehicles. They're actually the ones that came up with the proposal for us to use enterprise. And one of the ideas with that enterprise lease is that it includes basic maintenance like oil changes and that kind of thing. And that basic maintenance can be done at a whole list of independent garages within Kerrville. And so the idea is some of that basic maintenance could be done by local shops, and that gives our garage more time to focus on their public safety commitments, and then also some larger equipment, working on larger equipment instead of spending their time doing oil changes and that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
Right. Moving on to the water asset replacement. So similar to what we just talked about with you'll see the enterprise logo here. Right now, the water fund has they have one lease right now, next year going to 3, so adding 2 new ones. And their leases are some bigger trucks, more like F-250, 350 kind of ones, so you'll see a little bit higher price on those. We also have the lab purchasing a total organic carbon analyzer for $30,000.
Could
That
you
would-
explain to us what that does? I'm kidding.
What do you mean, Gary?
I could come up with something.
It measures total
You know, that
organic
carbon.
carbon, that's what it does.
Yes, it does.
You have
Yes,
to
I believe it
analyze
it.
analyzes total organic carbon.
You need to know the total.
So, actually, that you may remember that that purchase was actually in the 2020 budget. And when we started looking for places to cut in the spring, the lab said, we think we can wait a few more months to purchase this. And so it is not going to be purchased this year and instead is being rebudgeted for next year. And then we have a mower at Water Production, and that's the only thing we have there. On the water fund side, they are saving towards an expensive piece of equipment called a VACCON that our wastewater collections department uses, and it vacuums out pipes basically. And it's like a $380,000 piece of equipment, and we are trying to save as much as quickly as possible for that. The one that we have is about 10 years old. We only have one. If it has to be worked on, usually has to go out of town, and it's one of those ones that as it's aging, it's having more issues, and we really need it to be up all the time. Anything else to add on that?
It's just a very critical piece of equipment, that unfortunately is pretty pricey.
But it's not on here. right
It's
now.
not on there yet. It may be coming back to you as a budget amendment, and it may be, that's another thing where we're looking at once we get to the end of the year, and we've done this for the past few years. When we get to the end of the year and we look at where we actually come in with revenues and expenses, if there's any excess, we want to transfer it over to these asset replacement funds. And so that's specifically what we're looking for on the water fund side, is if we can transfer over additional money at the end of the year, we may be able to purchase this sooner.
Can you tell me what it is again?
It's called a
Does that cost?
VACCON,
They say how much that costs?
I
VAC-CON.
can't hear you.
Okay.
Did you say how much that cost, Amy?
About
I missed-
380,000.
380.
The piece of equipment that we utilize basically when we're having to do emergency repairs, when the lift station goes down or when a manhole is overwhelmed, we bring in the VACCON unit that gives us the ability to then work on that piece of infrastructure as the sewer continues to come in.
Yeah, we don't want that to.
But if we don't have one, where do we go to get one if it's needed?
We have, a couple of different things. We have the Water Distribution Department has a trailer version of it, so it's not the big truck, but it's a trailer version. Oh, look who we have here. Would you like to explain VACCON?
Sure, I can do the TLC thing too, if y'all wanna hear about that. Podium or, sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Please.
So I'm sorry, I was walking down, I don't know that I caught the whole discussion on the VACCON. But the TOC analyzer, what that does is it analyzes the amount of, okay. So VACCON
He
question?
was just trying to put Amy on the spot.
Don't wanna take any more time than I have.
Now you're just showing off, I'm sorry.
The VACCON is actually a piece of, it's a big truck that we have. You've probably seen it out on the streets. The big red one, it has a tank on the back of it. And on the front of it, it has a jetter unit. And what they do is they'll put in the sewer line, the jetter, and it goes up the sewer line, and then they're able to pull back the debris that's in the sewer line. So it's a big nozzle that goes in there and pulls it back. There's a vacuum unit that comes over the top of the truck, looks like a big elephant's trunk that's hanging down in the manhole. And the vacuum unit is actually sucking out that debris that the jetter unit's bringing back. And so it doesn't go down the line to the next stoppage and get stopped at the next place or in the next lift station. We actually remove it from the system. It doesn't cause any problem for our pumps, and it relieves all the backups that we have. And I think there was a question of where can you get one? They're not readily available. No, none of the surrounding communities have one. This is a very specific kind of a piece of equipment because they are so expensive. San Antonio River Authority is probably the next outfit that has any of them, and they don't lease them out. And so they're very hard to find, and when it breaks down, we don't have anything else that will vacuum it out. We have one other truck that actually can jet, but it just moves the blockage down the system. It does not remove the material from the system.
So by moving it on down, then it can cause problems further down.
Sure, when you have a blockage, it could be roots, it could be toilet paper, it could be, clothing. We've pulled boiling balls out of there, pieces of 2x4, whatever it is, it just moves down the line until it gets stopped up again. Then you chase that till it gets to the lift station. Hopefully you can get it out at the lift station. That's the first time that there's really a big opening that you can get to anything. And if not, then it gets stuck in the pumps at the lift station. You pull the pumps out and clear those pumps out.
Don't put bowling balls.
So far, just
Sewer.
one bowling ball, thank God, but they fit in a place that
It just seems
they're a pain. They're hard to get out.
It seems like if we don't have one and we're able to get along without it, then it's like, well, what do we do if we have these problems?
We do have one. We've had one.
Oh, we do have
Oh,
one.
yes, ma'am.
Ten
Yeah,
years
we,
old.
yeah.
Okay,
It's
I
10 years
didn't
old, and
realize that.
it's
Okay.
just- You may have seen it around town. It gets used
Okay.
quite a bit, actually.
Okay.
I
So
will tell you
this
from
is-
personal experience, we had a blockage in the main street, and this is about a year and a half ago. And we would not, the city, I don't think, could have fixed that without excavating Main Street if they had not had this piece. And that sewer main's what, 8 or 10 feet deep?
Yes, sir. Yeah, right in the middle
And
of the street there's
it would
one.
have shut down Main Street for some period of time. It's a critical piece of equipment.
So this is just waiting to buy a new one, is
Yes,
what
ma'am.
this is
This
all
will be
about.
the
Okay.
second one that we've purchased since
Okay.
we've been here, that we keep replacing them because it is the only unit that we have. There's no other ones that are readily available. And when sewer's running on the ground, everybody's in a panic. Where do you get it? How do you get it here fast enough? And, they never happen during the days when everybody's at work.
Who
and
makes
sometimes-
them?
There's about 4 or 5 different companies. The last one we bought was a VATCon unit. We will actually, when we get close to purchasing them, I have my staff goes out and we bring, there's such a big demand to sell these units because they are so expensive. I said, y'all test drive all of them that you can. Make sure we're getting exactly what we want, the best bang for our buck, and at the best value that works the best and that we think has the best longevity. Last time we went with VATCon.
If you guys had wanted around the TML conference, they had them on display down there.
The mayor's awesome.
Hey, I was gonna say, they had a great unit.
I don't know why
like
I
this
missed
at
that.
TML
They were
conference- TML conference in San Antonio, and I was impressed. I mean, the vacuum plus the blower, but Mark wouldn't let me buy it for the city. So. By the way, that total organic carbon analyzer, instead of taco, it's toca, is the alliteration.
All right, next time I'll call it that.
Thank you, Stuart.
Okay, now wait. Did you explain zero-turn mower? And I'm just
My
looking.
husband can.
I'm looking at the price. I'm looking at the price and saying, okay, is that what I think it is?
It's a riding mower that can go on slopes at the water production plant down, getting down
It's
towards the
probably a
river.
60-inch deck would be my guess, and that's a typical retail price for that mower.
This is not your average yard mower. This is for very large acreage pieces of property.
This would be like a
that-
big Gravely or one of those units. And it's what the commercial mowers in town use. It's what the
Nice.
Parks Department uses to mow our parks with.
Okay.
All right, moving on to general capital projects. You'll see the big piece of papers at your desk here. We've talked about this before, so I'll go through fairly quickly, but obviously on the general fund side, our biggest projects are going to be streets and drainage related. And these are streets and drainage projects that are being funded with the debt that was issued last year. There's no new funding for that. And then some of the other things that we'll be finishing up are the Olympic Drive extension. We also have in $200,000 for Kerrville Sports Complex improvements that are being grant funded. And then we have some other smaller projects after that. Because the only other larger one is the airport T hangar project. So that's something that's been in the works for a long time. We actually have the entire $150,000 already allocated for it from last year's budget and this year's budget, a portion from each. But it'll just be transferred over to the airport as they get ready to actually undertake that project. Anything on general capital projects?
Amy, just looking at that just real quick. So in FY 2019, we spent about $40,000 for development service software.
Yes.
600 last year, then we're back up to 40,000 this year. What's is it a new module? Is it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we're adding all those modules that we'd
Yes.
originally talked about.
Correct, yes.
And is that gonna be at least for some period of time, kind of the end of that expense?
Yeah, once we get, this is kind of the expense to actually implement the new module, so it includes like training and conversion and
Right.
Any new hardware that's required, that kind of thing. And then once it's implemented, then just the annual maintenance, actually I think it's paid on a monthly basis, is part of the development services operating budget. So there is a software cost every month that's paid for
But that wouldn't be
having that.
capital, that would just be operating expense.
That's just operating budget,
So
right?
I guess what I'm asking, do we anticipate this 40,000 to be kind of the last one for some period of time, or is this gonna be an annual for the next 2 or 3 years?
My understanding is once they get these next modules implemented, then, we're sticking with MGO for a period of time, and it would just be the operating expense modules
Okay.
going forward. Anything else to add on that?
Unless they add some module that we don't currently have or something like that.
Okay, but this should pretty much complete
Yes.
the dome or the
Yes.
box, okay?
And Amy, on that Kerrville Sports Complex, that's a Callow grant, right? From
Correct.
Callow Foundation from here.
Correct.
Yes.
All right.
And the 70,000 for the subdivision code, that's for consultants?
And attorneys.
And legal, right. Okay, moving on to the water capital projects. So second big page here. You'll see that we have the Guadalupe River Utility Crossing. That's funded through a grant from the Texas Water Development Board. We have the Bluebell water line replacement, which you've recently seen and heard about. We have expenses for the Ellenberger well and some expenses related to master plan updates, the Knapp Road projects that we talked about that will be funded with the remaining Texas Water Development Board funds from the Legion Lift Station. We have some tank painting and repairs. And then we have some money allocated here for advanced metering infrastructure. You can see that's, let's see, on line 8, and it's over a 3-year period. So what we're looking at is on our meters and our registers have a certain life, and we're nearing the end of that life. So we have to be replacing these registers anyway. And right now we have technology that is a drive-by technology. So our meter technicians actually have to go drive by your house to see how much water you use during the month and to prepare a bill. We're looking at putting in technology that is called fixed base technology. So it would be kind of an antenna thing that would probably be like on a water tower or something like that. So a few of them around town. And the meters would transmit to that tower, and we'd be able to get data real time. We definitely have a lot of customers who come from other cities and really expect us to be able to notify them, if there's a significant leak or something like that. But we are not able to do that until we actually go drive by their house and see, what they used in the past month. With this technology, we'd be able to get reads like every 15 minutes.
So you set it up, 15 minutes to an hour for the choose.
So is this, again, particularly in this year, is this a long-term cost savings?
There's multiple factors, so we're looking at it mostly from a water loss standpoint, because say if we read your meter on the 20th and we don't read it again until the next 20th, and you develop a leak on the 10th, you don't even know for potentially 20 to 30 days.
Been there,
So
done
we
that.
can tell you exactly, so
Yeah,
we can
I've
tell
been
you
there, done that
today
too.
that your meter was flagged for high consumption, then we potentially could save, 30 days of water loss
Okay,
there.
that-
Then we're also.
So the
gonna-
water loss offsets a lot of the cost probably
Correct.
then. That makes
Because
sense
we
to
do a
me.
lot of the customer adjustments for those kind of things as well.
The
Plus,
typical
we're already in the
driving.
position where we're having to replace the existing system.
Right.
Okay.
We're
So,
at the end of the life on these existing registers.
And K-Pub has gone to a system similar.
Yes, uh-huh. Yeah, and we looked at, if we could piggyback on the K-Pub system, but we've come to the conclusion that theirs is so electric utility specific that, there were too many risk factors involved with the, kind of no water, utility, experience with that company and that kind of thing. And it really wasn't any cost savings, actually, it was cheaper to do it this way. So this is still using our existing, it's called Neptune is the brand of meter that we use. So it's still staying with the Neptune technology that we are familiar with and that we think works well. And it's over a 3-year period. We have 3 cycles of utility billing. So we bill 3 times a month, and it's kind of by geographic area. So this part of town, gets bills at one time, this part the next time. And that goes back to like when you had to walk to read meters, kind of thing. But anyway, we're looking at replacing 1 cycle at a time. And because we're doing it like that, our meter technicians could do all of the replacement of registers. We don't need to hire an outside company to come in and, do it all at one time.
What's the life expectancy on one of these units?
It's about 10 years on the register, 20 years on the actual meter.
So we're looking at, we're spending $1 million every 10 years to replace these.
Well, it really depends on, maintenance issues, just some last longer than others. But in this case, we'll be replacing mostly antennas, because our current infrastructure can talk to this new system. So as long as they have useful life left, we can continue to use those, and then we'll replace them as they run out. Yeah, so this is $735,000, and this is replacing all of the registers and some of the antennas. And then our meter bodies are still under warranty, so they last a lot longer anyway, but if they do fail, we're able to get those replaced under a warranty currently, so.
So it wouldn't necessarily always be that much, it sounds like to me.
Yeah,
It's gonna
it depends, and it depends on if you have to actually be replacing the meters. So right now, this doesn't include the meters, it includes just the registers and the antennas, so.
Okay.
And Amy, on the Guadalupe River utility crossing, that was the 534, the bridge, and this is most of that money is what came back to us from different entities, insurance and things of that nature.
We received 1.5 million in grants, and actually they're loan forgiveness, but anyway, from the Texas Water Development Board, and it was through a disaster grant program that they have, so we do not have to repay that
Right.
money.
Real quickly, line 13.
Yes. Yeah, so this is just some money that is built into the budget for things like, some of these estimates for projects, we don't have any bids yet. So if we get bids back and they are, different than what we're expecting, we have a little bit of money there. And then oversizing, anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, so for instance, there are development projects that sometimes occur throughout the year that they may, as a base minimum, have to put in an 8-inch pipe, and we think, no, it makes more sense to go put in a 10-inch pipe because we know there'll be development down the road, and so, but their pro rata share is only a certain portion, and so this allows us at least a little bit of contingency for the city to have the ability to enter into that project and to oversize it so it's more appropriate for the community over the long term,
So we're not having to rip a pipe out and replace it the next year because there's a development that goes on just down the road.
And that's what, we did that on NAP, right? Is that what we oversized those?
We've had a number of projects over the year. I believe NAP is one of those that we had some time ago.
I guess what I'm looking at, this is a brand new line item though, is that correct?
No, sir.
Yeah, we had it in this year's budget as well. And it doesn't, it's not allocated for a specific project at this time. And if there's not a project that comes up that needs it, we won't use it. But we do want to have something there in those situations that often do arise during the year.
But is it I assume it's a cumulative account, so if we don't use the 200,000, it rolls into the next year?
Yeah.
So-
Yes, yeah.
and I
It
guess that's why
becomes
I'm-
part of that fund balance. And so this is the water capital projects fund. So it has to be used for a
Sure,
water-related
no, I
capital
understand that.
project.
I'm just curious why in previous years, there's no money in that, but you're saying we have budgeted for
Those are
that in
the
years
actual-
past?
Yeah, we have budgeted for that in years past, but when we spend it, we don't call it capital contingency. We call it Bluebell water line replacement, or, we move it into the actual project that it's part of. Does that make sense? Maybe I shouldn't use Bluebell as an example, but, for example, if we, did some of like on the NAP project, something like that, if we decided that we wanted to make something larger than what was originally planned and we needed a little bit more money, we would move it from that contingency into the NAP road.
You've never seen actual then.
No,
It moves into the line item.
That's
it
right.
moves into the line item that it's actually used for.
Same thing with general fund.
Right,
We don't spend out of contingency. We move the money to the
Yes.
account where we're spending. it.
Sure,
yes,
okay,
yeah, and water fund has that.
thank
too.
you.
All right, moving on to a few of the other funds. So these are some smaller funds that have restricted balances that can only be used for certain things. The Library Memorial Fund, what we're looking at here, we have a library outreach vehicle that's budgeted and book purchases that are budgeted there. This is all coming from money that is given to the library, basically through wills. The Police Special Revenue Fund, so the police
Let
department,
me back up just a second.
yes,
The library, just comment, I use the library regularly, but my wife, particularly in this stay-at-home time, has really used it and just found it to be so helpful, and they're responsive, and what they're putting online is great. So, anyway, good word.
That's great to hear, yeah, they do a fantastic job over there for sure. Yeah, and there's lots of people that want to give money to the library, and it really does support our entire community. The Police Special Revenue Fund is another type of special revenue fund that gets money primarily from seized items. So money that's seized when someone is arrested and the money was part of a crime, something like that. It can be given to the police department if a judge decides to do that as part of the prosecution. And that money has to be used for police department purchases. And this next year, they're looking at purchasing some tactical helmets and new iPads for their patrol vehicles, and those are the amounts shown there. Municipal court also has a special revenue fund, so there are multiple fees that municipal court assesses that have restrictions on how those fees can be used, and this is coming from the state. And so they get fees for child safety, technology, security, and truancy, and they have to spend that money according to those categories as well. So these are some of the items that they're looking at spending money on. The bailiff is part of security, the court software conversion is part of technology, and the kiosk and security camera maintenance are also split between the security and the technology side. And then that gets us back to the calendar again. And then back to any questions and comments that you have.
Just real quick, I know that Amy had sent you all the proposed fee schedule. That was really a draft. We're still working on that and tweaking it. Not sure all that's going to actually materialize. So were there any questions about some of that, if y'all have had a chance to review it? They were highlighted in yellow, any changes?
So we did have a few dollars on the golf green fees and cart fees. One thing also to mention is you'll see several changes in the water section, but they're specifically related to like taps and
Yeah, that's
sale
fine.
of new meters and that kind of thing. And those are pass-through costs, so we're looking at what do we actually have to spend to buy the meter and then put it in. And so the changes there just relate to the changes in the costs that we have to pay for that.
Okay, so then that really was the only place I saw significant changes in that, and that's basically, we're just passing through
Correct.
cost. We're not trying to make that a profit center.
Right.
Right. The other one that always comes up too is solid waste. With Republic,
that's-
we've
I know
got,
that's
that's a
a pass-through.
pass-through from our contract with an indexed price. So every year we see an adjustment on those.
Okay.
All right. I really appreciate y'all's time today, and next step is you'll be getting your proposed budget book on July 31st.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions.
Yes.
Sales tax revenue has gone up since 2011. Is that just accounting coming out of the Great Recession?
There's multiple factors at play. So, certainly the economy has expanded. But as I'm sure all of you have noticed, Kerrville, itself has expanded, and especially Kerrville as a regional retail hub. And, we have stores here that, especially people coming in from the west, we're kind of the first stop to get to, that you can go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Hobby Lobby. We continue to get more Harbor Freight, that kind of thing. So we've definitely expanded our presence as a regional retail hub. And then we've also benefited from some legal changes related to online sales. So back in 2011, you didn't have to pay sales tax if you purchased something online. Now you do, not only from Amazon, but also from these marketplace sellers. So we're getting money starting really this year that we've never seen before because of the online sales tax. And that's been a benefit to us. Anything else you'll want to add on that?
Okay, one other question. Since 1984, every year, we've gotten the Certificate of Achievement in Excellence in Financial Reporting. Do you anticipate we will get that again this year?
Yes, sir, I do.
Be better.
Well, that's a great record.
Yeah, and we actually get two. We get an award for the budget book and for the annual report. So the one you're talking about is for the annual report. The one for the budget book, we actually just received about a month ago for our budget book last year. It takes a while for them to filter all the way through it. So yes, and we will be applying for, and we expect to be receiving those going forward. And those were some of the things with the changes to our charter, where we really focused on in our charter that we will follow all those guidelines with regards to our budget. And they're very strict, and they get updated every year, that kind of thing, and we intend to follow them.
And that also factors into our bond rating, does it not?
Yes.
So thank you.
The RV site fee schedule, that they went up. I assume you had data from the Parks and Recreation that supported this. Some of these are from $650 a month to $900 a month. That's a pretty big jump. But we stay full. I guess that raises in market.
I can speak to that. So I did talk to Ashley about that specifically, and so in the past few years, they've gone up on their daily rate to come up to market standards, and so they haven't changed anything with their monthly rates, so this is just getting them in line with what the daily rates are, and then also staying within the market.
Okay, thank
But
you.
definitely, we do look at state parks as a comparison, and then other, local RV parks too.
Okay, it's very popular.
All right, if there are no further questions, I do need to see EA and Mike afterwards. If there are no further questions, we are adjourned.